Welcome to the Inner Voice Podcast with the Conscious Living Coach. Join your host Jennifer Mackenzie and guests as they delve deep into the mind, spiritual practices, and holistic well-being. What does your inner voice say to you?
And welcome to another episode of That Inner Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Mackenzie, the Conscious Living Coach. And I'm joined today by Sara Kedge. Sara is a neurodiversity entrepreneurship specialist. That was a mouthful. Welcome, Sara. How are you doing?
I'm really doing well. Thank you ever so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming. I'm excited about our conversation. We're going to be talking all about neurodiversity, entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk about niching and how entrepreneurs navigate the neurotypical world.
Yep, all of that stuff, and probably a whole bunch of stuff besides that.
Yes, exactly. So would you like to firstly introduce yourself and tell the listeners and watchers a little bit about who you are? And if you are watching and listening, do give us a like and give us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't forget and you don't miss another episode. So over to you, Sara.
So my name's Sara Kedge. I am, as Jennifer said, I am a neurodiversity specialist. So I do a number of things. I have an online community of neurodiverse entrepreneurs, and we help people set up and run and grow their businesses. And as part of that, I run coaching and consultancy services for people who are neurodiverse to get a little bit of focus, develop a strategy, develop clarity in what they're offering, and then an action plan that works for them. And it's really important for me to sort of emphasize it's like actually it works for them, because neurodiverse brains work differently to neurotypical brains. And most of the entrepreneurship and business stuff that's out there is designed for neurotypical brains.
Yes, it is.
Aside that, I work with a business partner called Sue Marnie, and we run a company called Neurodivergent. And we go into large organizations, so the big corporates, and we train them about neuro-inclusion. So we talk to them about what neurodiversity is, how it manifests in the workplace, and then support them to actually make shifts in their culture, their practices, their policies, so that workplaces are a little bit more friendly to them, to us.
Wow. That sounds good. Like such important work. So for those that don't know, what is neurodiversity?
Okay.
Neurotypical. Just explain.
Okay, so neurodiversity is part of the natural span and spread of how brains work. Some of our brains work in very particular ways, and they have collections of attributes that can cause us challenges. Mm-hmm. And when we have these collections, we give them names such as autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD.
Never heard of that one.
Which one?
I can't pronounce it.
Dyscalculia?
Yes.
Yes. It's kind of like a number dyslexia.
Oh.
I know. It's awesome. But also has to be ADHD. Also cover acquired tic disorders and acquired neurodiversity. And the acquired neurodiversity is where people have injuries or illnesses that affect their brain functioning, and then they acquire neurodiverse traits.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh. So then a neurotypical brain then is norms.
No, they're not normal. They're just people who don't have the traits of any of those identities.
That's just what I call them.
You just wanted to be provocative, didn't you? So at the moment, we estimate around 1 in 7 people is in some way neurodiverse or neurodivergent, and everybody else is neurotypical.
Right. Okay. That explains it well. And so I found out like last year that I actually have a neurotypical brain, which makes not neurotypical, neurodiverse brain. So
I was going to say.
So I'm on the autistic spectrum and I have like ADD. So it's like, well, wow, this is not a surprise, but it made a lot of sense to me. So do you have ADHD yourself? Well?
So I am profoundly dyspraxic, otherwise known as developmental coordination disorder.
Right.
And I am also ADHD. but my predominant thing is dyspraxia, which means I am incredibly clumsy. I have very poor spatial awareness. I have difficulty processing information from one place to another. I have a bit of emotional dysregulation. I struggle with some social cues and some social expectations of me. And then you stick the ADHD on top of that, and I can't pay attention to anything for more than 5 minutes. But I didn't get the label until I was 37 years old. So it was quite late on into my life, and before I got a label for it.
I'm still going through my assessments at the minute and stuff like that. So I don't actually have a diagnosis, but I have like something that makes sense to me in my mind, but then I don't have the official diagnosis yet. But I think it's pretty obvious. But, you know, I'm going to stay open-minded until I see a professional. It doesn't matter. I'm just me and getting on with my life and working my way around things at the best that I can. And
I think sometimes the diagnosis is a really interesting thing, because people sort of like think the diagnosis is like the epitome and that must happen. But diagnosis, you don't have to be diagnosed to be able to identify yourself with being neurodivergent. You just need to be able to recognize that actually a collection of your behaviors causes you challenges in the world. And actually, once you get a diagnosis, that isn't the end point of your journey. For most people, getting a label or getting a professional to say, actually, your label is dyspraxia, ADHD, or any of the others, that then starts a journey of you almost going through a grief cycle process, going, actually, that's not me, rejecting it, also almost that denial. Then you go through a phase of being, well, if I'd known about this earlier, if I wasn't ADHD, then I shoulda, woulda, coulda. And you just go through this awful grief cycle until you come out the end going, actually, this is me. There are things I find difficult, but there are also things about my brain that are freaking awesome and better than anybody else's.
So on this podcast, we break the silence and we break the stigma. And we get talking about, you know, about mental health, about addiction, about, you know, challenges that people face in the world. So what sort of challenges have you faced personally growing up and in the world, if you feel comfortable to share?
Oh, yeah, no, of course, not a problem. So with your neurodiverse brains, what you do is you get told from a very early age that how you think and how you behave isn't okay. So you start to pick up what I like to call requests to modify from your parents, from schools, from telly, from anybody, requests to modify your behavior. And they then become masks that you put on every day. So when I get out of my bedroom or went out to school, I put this mask on that meant that I regulated my level of emotion, my level of conversation, my eye contact, how I dressed, the amount of information I presented to the world. So every day, before I even got into contact with anybody else, I'd done a whole bunch of emotional and intellectual labor just to pretend to be like everybody else. That's exhausting. And the challenge with neurodiverse people is when we do all this extra labor, you then come into contact with something that's a minor road hump in life, and that can have completely or outwardly seem to completely derail you in a disproportionate way. But actually, to the outside world, somebody dinked your car, and then I might just absolutely lose my shit. Disproportionate. But actually, what's underneath that is actually I've already done all this intellectual emotional labor that I'm already exhausted, that this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And doing that on a daily basis, having to work out how much eye contact is okay. Not too much, not too little. Pay attention, Kedge. Okay, how do I pay attention? Okay, I need to look at you. Okay, but my brain's already going over there and it's looking out the window and it's doing all these things. No, I have to pay attention. And and for some people, that can result in burnout. So you just become so overwhelmed and so exhausted by doing all this work that you just need to go and hide. And for some people, that can also trigger mental ill health, mental distress, that hasn't got any, I want to say, biological foundation, other than I'm just so bloody exhausted by having to pretend to be somebody I'm inherently not. I just don't want to deal with the world right now, or manifest in a whole bunch of different symptoms of mental distress. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. It absolutely makes sense. And I'm sitting here nodding. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like me. That sounds like me.
Yeah.
I relate to that. Yeah. And it is exhausting, isn't it? Having to put on those masks like everywhere you go. And it's like, you know, what, you know, do people like hugs? Do they not like hugs? Like, can I touch them? Do I not touch them? What's their boundaries?
Some people, it's like, just don't touch me. But the social norm is to hug people. I'm like, some of my autistic friends have been like, the pandemic has been one of the best things to happen to them because nobody wants to touch them.
Oh, yes.
Brilliant.
What's those awkward moments, isn't it? No, like, keep your distance.
I have a friend who likes to give me inappropriately long hugs. And it's just, yeah. Also, we were chatting backstage a little bit and you were talking about being a chameleon.
Yes, before I even knew what neurodivergent was, I'd never even heard of it. When I was younger, working in different jobs and stuff like that, I labeled myself as a social chameleon. I said I can adapt. I just pretend to be whoever I want to be in that situation. And I called myself, I'd make a great actress because I could just walk into a room. I was like, right, okay, they're quite posh and corporate. I'm going to pretend I'm posh and corporate today. And then, like, in another situation, people would ask me if I'm from up north. People would ask me if I'm from London, because I would take on somebody else's personality, because I would look at them and watch them, and I still do it. I still find myself doing that, like, subconsciously in situations.
And that comes from that sort of lifelong request to modify. So whenever I walk out the house or walk into a social situation, it's like when I was going to do my pub and clubbing, I'd walk into a pub and I'd already clocked, before any of my neurotypical friends had even, the tone, the atmosphere in the place, what kind of language they were using, the body language. And you'd sort of walk in and within 20 seconds, you'd be able to sort of morph into this space. And that's from a lifetime of being told you need to behave in the way that's appropriate to here. So you learn this technique and this skill of being able to chameleon yourself into wherever is appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that skill? I think that's quite a skill. Really? Yeah, it got me quite far actually in situations. It got me really good jobs actually. Right, okay, I'm going to read you and I'm going to say exactly what you want me to say. And I've blagged my way into so many things. The blonde hair and the big tits probably helped as well in certain situations.
Well, absolutely. It's those things sort of when you're going into an interview, you sort of like you clock a place and you've got a shirt on. You're like, some places you'll do the button up, and then they're like, I've already clocked you on the button up. It's
like, wow, I really did kind of blag my way into a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely, and because human interaction is about mirroring. The only thing that neurotypicals don't realize is that neurodiverse people are absolute experts at mirroring behaviors, intonation, tone of language, body language. We're all somatic experts.
Yeah.
The only shame of that is because we have been given these requests to modify throughout our lives. And for myself, I used to say, actually, I always feel like I'm playing a part. Before I became aware of my neurodivergence, I always feel like I'm playing a part in somebody else's drama.
Right.
And I was never quite sure who I actually was. Because when I was with my clubbing friends, I'd have that persona. When I was with my work friends, I'd have that persona. I'd have all these personas.
Yeah.
And I was never quite sure on who the core of me was.
Yeah.
And that's quite isolating. That's quite lonely. And it's quite confusing as well to just, actually, I don't really know who I am.
So do you feel a lot more who you are now?
Yeah.
You can be fully you in situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because I've stopped giving a fuck. When you put down the expectations of being neurotypical, And that comes as part of the awareness of your neurodivergence. You start, actually, this is who I am, and you start owning that. You can start putting down the requests to modify that you've been given all of your life, and then go, actually, does this work for me? No, it doesn't. Do I feel comfortable doing these things? Well, no, it does. So, for example, I was trying to get a job, a proper job, not a proper job. I was trying to get a job in a business, and my friend said to me, "Well, maybe if you dyed your hair brown." For those of you on the podcast, I have pastel pink and purple hair at the moment. It's shaved up the sides. Maybe if you cut your hair a bit more normal and dyed it brown, you would find it easier to get a job. And I was like, but that's not me. And I've had enough of my life trying to fit in, wearing the boring brown slacks and the shirt and no, not me. Yeah. So if somebody doesn't want me in their life or their business, me being me, then I'm not the right person for them.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like society will try and pigeonhole you into these little boxes. And I've had that like all my life. As I come out as bisexual, like, you know, very young, I was quite comfortable with it. But now it's like, pick a side. I was like, no, I don't need to. I can just be me. Pick a side. And it's like, oh, you're greedy, you know, you just want the best of both worlds. You completely do not understand what it means to be like bisexual or pansexual, whatever you want to call it, really. Like, you know, you're attracted to a person rather than a gender. And it's like, but everyone wants to pigeonhole you. Yeah. And it's like, well, you know, because I've got my hair all shaved up the sides, and like, someone said to me, you look like a proper lesbian. I'm like, well, what does a proper lesbian look like? Why? Because I've got a haircut. And I remember my stepmom, I don't think she'll watch this, hopefully not. And she said, oh, they look like lesbian sandals. I was like, can you describe what lesbian sandals look like? They look like Birkenstocks. I'm like, I said, I've never seen a lesbian in my community wearing Birkenstocks.
I've got Birkenstocks, I'm not going to lie.
Like, why are you associating a footwear type with sexual orientation?
Well, and you get that with and this is why sort of for me it took quite so long for me to recognize my neurodivergence, is because with my ADD, when you talk about ADD, you think about this little, and I'm going to be sort of really little blonde boy bouncing off the walls, screaming and not being able to be tied down. Well, I'm not. I'm a cis woman. Yeah. And I don't bounce off the walls. I have no attention, but I don't bounce off all the walls. So I didn't fit the profile of an ADHD person when I was a young person. So that's what took me so long to actually go, hang on a second. And it was only by accident that I found out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. It was because when I was doing my MBA, I was struggling. They've got an online platform called Moodle. And with my dyspraxia, I found it difficult to navigate all the different bits. And they eventually told me that they couldn't give me support, that I should then go to student services. And at that point, I was just like, well, screw you. I'm going to go to student services. I'm going to get myself a diagnosis. And you're going to give me a blue card and extra time. Just, you know. And then when I went through the process, they said, oh, yeah, you are actually very dyspraxic and ADHD. And at that point, I was like, oh, no, this was a joke.
Oh, right.
This was a revenge thing, and now you're telling me I'm actually got a problem. Yeah. That backfired on my shit, right?
Yeah. So let's just touch upon like the difference between mental health then, because often people mistake neurodivergent or neurodiversity for mental health. Yeah. Which then I like to separate the three things. So you have mental health, which everybody has to look after. Yeah. You have mental illness, which is diagnosed mental illness, and then you have neurodiversity. Yeah, divergent. I don't know if I say it right, but there's those three categories, and they're very separate, but can merge. Yeah. Things. So, what's your take on that, or your like opinion and
So as a concept, a neurodivergence is something that is generally a fixed thing about our brains. It's just how our brains are formed, that we think differently to neurotypical people. And it's there is some neuroplasticity involved in that, but it's not, it's generally fixed. It's not an illness.
Yeah.
It's not something that can be, you can control symptoms with some medications. For some people choose to take some medications to control symptoms, but actually your neurodiversity is part of how your brain's wired. Mental health, as we know, is different.
Yeah.
So they're separate. So although you can be neurodivergent or experience mental distress, you can also be neurodivergent and experience mental distress.
Yeah.
But they're not the same thing. And even though the sort of, is it the DCM-5, the diagnostic book, autism still appears within the diagnostic manual for mental ill health.
Oh, really?
Still in mental illness at the moment, at the time of recording. They're not mental illnesses.
No, not at all.
And so for me, one of the things around the labels around getting a diagnosis is difficult. It's because there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not ill.
Not a chemical thing. A lot of mental illnesses are chemicals in the brain. And different people have different levels of those chemicals, which change, and hence like things like bipolar, clinical depression. Anxiety is not a mental health, not an illness. It's a fear-based emotion, but then that's more under mental health rather than mental illness. But people often think that anxiety then is a mental illness. It's not an illness, because it's a fear-based emotion. It's a survival technique that every human needs, and it just gets out of hand. That's all. And that's when the intervention is needed with anxiety. But we need it to survive. And then this is where I love having these conversations. So to educate people, and it's like you're not all mentally ill. It's like, but things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia are then categorized as mental illness, but they can all be managed once you start to learn to understand how your brain and body works. They can all be managed, sometimes with or without medication.
I mean, one of the interesting is a paper that was released last year by a professor of Cambridge University, looking at the anthropological perspective on neurodivergence. And she was coming from the perspective that people with ADHD brains, in terms of historically, they would have been our hunters. So in our tribes and in our gatherings, pre-industrialization, going back in history, our ADHD brains would have had a real purpose in society. We would be in the hunter-killers, because we can have incredibly hyper-focus, attention, and really amazing short bursts of energy and attention. Lends itself to hunting. Our dyslexic brains are people with majorly, absolutely incredible creative thinking. They would have been our problem solvers. We need to get over this river or build this thing. And they would come up with amazing creative and inventive ways of doing things. It's only since we've gone into an industrialization space where things have been more homogenized, or sort of like people have been sort of more brought into a typical space, that the bonuses and the benefits that you get with neurodivergence have been sort of lost almost.
It's almost like us like creatives almost get like pushed out of society and free thinkers at the moment. Especially this has come to light with things like the pandemic. I don't really want to go into all that and vaccines and all that sort of stuff, but there's a lot of divide, I think, between the types of people that you see in awakened communities and not. It's interesting to kind of sit back and observe like the types of people that are then forming these two different opinions, and then the ones that are kind of in the middle as well. It's interesting to be an observer. I really like the idea of what you said about that article. That sounds really interesting.
I'll go find it and I'll send it out to you. But it's a really interesting paper, sort of looking at actually how the value of different types of brains. So, for example, people with heightened levels of anxiety, they might have, and from a historical, they would have been the people that you would have sort of like gone looking to see if there were threats to the community, because
these meerkats that you see, the ones that are on lookout They're the ones. And you've got the ones that are burrowing and stuff like that. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and so as a community, we have all these amazing skills and abilities and talents that through the Industrial Revolution and through the scientific approach to society have been lost. The really exciting thing is that some of the larger companies are really starting to cotton on to the benefits that neurodivergent brains have and can provide them. So, for example, Hewlett-Packard are actively recruiting dyslexic people. Right? They've recognised that in their research and development department, they've got a lack of creative thinking. They've got lots of people in those departments who think like they already think, and so they're looking for dyslexic people because they have the creativity. Google have got a massive program recruiting in people who are autistic. Because some autistic people, their attention to detail, their ability to special interest and sort of maintain focus on something is something that they need in computers and analytics. They're actually looking and seeking out for the superpowers, the benefits of neurodiversity, and actually actively looking to recruit them in.
It's a superpower, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how does this, so from a personal point of view, before I even knew anything about this, I couldn't work for somebody. Yeah. I got sacked or asked to leave quietly from many a job because I'm a little bit fiery too. So, and I'm not afraid to speak my mind or possibly throw chairs across the room. Anyway, we won't talk about that. Yes. So temper, but I could never work for anyone. No. And I like to do things my way, and I found ways that would work for me to do things. And I couldn't sit at a desk, so I would fidget, and I would find excuses to just move around. And I was selling houses, and I was like, I would make up appointments so I could go and get the keys and go and get out of the car. How did the appointment go?
And you're not alone. I mean, the reason I work for myself, so I've got my business is and I've said for donkey's years, I'm a shit employee. Mm-hmm. I'm a real workhorse. And if I go into, one of the problems I had is in business, because of my ability to hyper focus, I would get more work done in a few hours than my colleagues would do in a full 5-day period. Mm-hmm. So I'd have a couple of hours hyper focusing, I'd get everything done, and I'd be really bored. And I might tap. Then I'd be like, I need to occupy myself. So then I used to get myself into mischief. Yeah. The problem is that most businesses and organizations and institutions are designed around neurotypical brains. Mm-hmm. People who can maintain Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 patterns of working, who can tolerate overhead lighting, who can not be distressed by having ambient noise or temperature. Or these places are not for neurodiverse people. They're not designed for neurodiverse people. So when we get told, and nobody tells us when we're kids, nobody tells us that not having a job is an option.
Yeah.
Because when you're a kid, you go through personal social health education where they tell you how to write a CV. You go and see the careers advisor who tells you how to write a cover letter, and then somebody who tells you how to do interviews. No fucker tells you can actually run your own business.
Yeah, I know.
This is one of my bugbears. But when we go into businesses, we challenge businesses with our behaviour because it doesn't work for us, and we want to do a good job.
Yeah, I wasn't just being an arsehole. I genuinely wanted to do the job, but I do not like authority either, and I like to do things my way. And I, this is why I became a CEO of my own companies, and work for myself is because I cannot and will not work for the people. And to this, then I find in the entrepreneurial space there are quite a lot of people that feel that way. And most recently, I've been talking to and collaborating with, or just having these, or linking up with on social media, the people that I feel similar to me, and also neurodivergent, and it's like, wow, all these little light bulb moments keep going off. It's like, oh, this is great, and it's like, yeah, another one. No, I really relate. And because I struggled in business because there was a certain way, or so I thought, that I was supposed to do stuff. And then when I've had business coaches before, that I've just gone like, you don't get what I mean. And I just couldn't follow the strategies and the technology bits, and it made me nearly want to throw in the towel until I kind of started realizing that I could do things a different way, and I have to find these people that understand me and can work with me. How you work with entrepreneurs who have those problems? So what's your view and take on that?
So when you look at how starting up businesses, so one of the things I do is I teach down at Oxford Brookes University on their business management program. I've been lecturing for the last 5 years. Even now, the body of thinking that is used to structure business, entrepreneurship, setting your own company, how you run things, comes from a very narrow group of thinkers and group of papers. So when you come to run your own business, everything out there is kind of a received wisdom that you do things in a particular way, neurotypical way. But actually, my brain's already proven I don't work like that because I've tried working in businesses. So it's then undoing some of that behavior and asking. And when I'm working with clients, we start with a brain dump.
Yeah.
And we start with, one of my packages, you come for 3 hours with me, if that works for you. And we just start by listening. And then from me listening to you, we start to build a picture of actually what works for you in terms of your working rhythms and patterns. So for example, with my community, people that start running their own business, they still work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And it takes a little while of nudging for people to go, do you know what, when's your energy best? Well, my energy is best at 10 o'clock at night until 2 o'clock in the morning. So run your business at that time. Oh, we can't do that. Why not? That's when your energy is best and your attention is best. Roll with it. So one of the big shifts is sort of supporting people moving from what you've been told all your life is a way to run a business and run and work, to then start to listen to the patterns and rhythms that work for you. And that really does take a lot of energy because you're pushing against a lifetime of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. When you run a business, you must have a business plan, and that business plan must be 52 pages long, and it must contain a marketing strategy and this and niching, for God's sake. I mean, niching is a massive thing right now.
Yes, it hurts my head. It really does. Because I work with such a diverse set of people in the work that I do. But they all have the same undertone of wanting to live a happier, healthier life. And, mastering the mind, working on the mindset, working on healing the body because of mind-body connection. And it's all in that bubble. But the people are extremely different.
And what you're told, again, received wisdom, and it comes from marketing strategy. People, you have to look at your ideal client avatar. And actually, for me, I work with neurodiverse entrepreneurs. That's who I work with. And I work with large organizations who want to become neurodiverse inclusive.
Yeah.
There isn't a client avatar. Yeah. Can't develop that because it doesn't. And one of my friends shifted that into the ideal client experience.
Right.
Instead of creating a person, because there's lots of people out there who are selling 5-day courses and masterminds who say, draw your person, give them a name and age, and tell me all about their life. Have you heard this shit? For some people, that really works. That really works. But actually, for those of us that are working in marginalised communities or separate communities, actually what's more useful is looking at the client experience. If nothing else, it removes gender from the equation.
Yeah.
Because many ideal client avatars, are you talking to men or women?
Yeah,
Well, actually, in the autistic population, 60% of the autistic population also identify as being non-binary. So the second I talk about men and women, I'm alienating my non-binary and my trans people.
Exactly. I don't bring gender into it. I say individuals in my marketing because that's how I feel about people. I'm not really big on putting genders into something. And it's like with how we feel, and I support the trans community and everything as well, and non-binary. One of my children is actually wants to be identified as non-binary, and they are 9, and yeah, and I'm supporting that 100%. I get it wrong sometimes, but they have to be.
There's a whole process for that, but yeah, congratulations. Your child is very lucky to have you.
Yes.
But going back to the nichey thing, if you've got an ADHD brain like mine, there's a common theme of neurodiversity among my stuff. But in terms, if you ask me to do the same thing day in, day out, week in, week out, I would just go potty. So niching down, you can have a hero product, and I have hero products. I have my get you going thing. I have my strategy, clarity and action planning thing. But I have a range of things, because otherwise it's not going to work for my brain. It's just not. I'm going to lose attention, and then I might as well go and work in the accounts department.
Yeah. So if anybody is watching and listening and you are going, this sounds like me, you know, get talking to Sara, and because, you know, there are ways around it. Don't throw in the towel in your business. And if you don't feel aligned with like who you're working with or what you're doing and what you've been told to do, and it's like, I am bored to the back teeth of seeing on social media, I will make you 10 grand with these easy steps. If anyone keeps posting that, they get them deleted.
I literally did a post yesterday of a picture of me laughing, going, and then they told me I would get a 7-figure sum with these 3 steps. It's just rot. It's and this is the thing that drives me mad in the business world, is that with entrepreneurs, there are so many people out there promising you quick fix, do my mastermind, do my course. And actually what they don't tell you is that when you're running your own business, there's a journey on this, and it takes time. You have to undo all of this mental bollocks that you've been fed around what having a working life looks like. You then have to work out what it is you're selling, who you're selling it to, and how you're going to get there. And that takes time. So I went self-employed again this last time, just before the pandemic hit. And in the last 2 years, I've sort of gone all over the place until I've actually nailed it down.
Yeah.
But you think that you should have it sorted right now?
Yeah.
There's a journey of time.
It does take time. Good things take time, and you're learning along the way. I mean, I started my business as a massage and Reiki therapist in my lounge with £3.50 in my bank and a head full of limited beliefs. And I've built on that. And, you know, it went from a few clients to me turning a shed in my garden into a treatment room. And then that got knocked down. I built the big studio, and it does take time. It takes time, and it takes consistency, and it takes effort, and you're going to make mistakes. I made a shit ton of mistakes, but it didn't stop me. But I don't really call them mistakes, and you can reinvent yourself and reroute what you want to do. So I was trained in beauty for 10 years. I did beauty for 10 years, and it just doesn't resonate with me anymore. So I don't do it. But then I really got passionate about these sort of things, this podcasting, about talking to people. And in the pandemic, I because my business closed completely, and I was like, wow, I get the chance now to do this stuff online that I wanted to do, and I just loved it. And I love doing this podcast, and I loved like doing a talk show and just speaking to people. And a big thing for me is getting people seen and heard, and giving people a platform for a voice. And something that I was always told is to be quiet. And I'm like, no.
The request to modify.
Yeah.
Many ADD or ADHD people have got a lot to say about them and get passionate. And I want to tell you about the things. Be quiet. Be quiet.
Stop talking. Oh, I'm too busy to listen to that right now. Yeah, all those sorts of things that you hear. And like, these are why these conversations and putting this content out there, hearing from you and I and everybody else, and you having these conversations with people, is important, because people go, oh my God, that's so me. And it gives them permission then to start exploring their own neurodiversity, their own mental health, their own making changes in their own lives and their own businesses.
And that's where the sort of so How to Entrepreneur is the community that I run, and that's kind of when it kind of grew is out of a tiny little seed of an idea, and what it's become is this space where people come in. And they come in sort of almost tentatively, as they might not be set up yet as an entrepreneur, or they might be going, and they sort of come in, and then they go, "This is my people."
Yay! What's your? Is it a group? Is it a free? Is this a community group? Is it a paid group?
It's a free group. So How to Entrepreneuro. It's a free group. I think we've got about 600 members now, so we're not massive. We are neurodiverse exclusive. If you're neurotypical, you won't be allowed in. If you sneak in and we find you, we yeet you out. So it's a space just for anybody who's neurodiverse and got aspirations to start up a business, have started up a business, or want to grow a business. Yeah. And we provide, so on a Monday morning, anybody can come in and do a Monday morning live. So like this, you have a conversation to the community. Tuesdays, there's an opportunity to pitch your thing. We're not selling things. There is one post once a week that you pitch your thing. Wednesday, we have a group coaching session where you get to ask the community. And it's not me, I'm in there, but it's not me, but you get to say, actually, some weeks it's like, I don't know how to, I don't know, fill my tax return in. Does anybody know? Other weeks it's like, I've got this problem. Other weeks is I'm feeling really crappy and I'm really cruddy. And all these questions in the community then come together and answer and provide support, guidance and information. We've got a virtual office on Thursday. But essentially it's just a group of neurodiverse entrepreneurs saying, celebrating the things that they do amazingly, but also asking questions and giving answers to actually these things I'm really struggling with. From an
That's a great space to be. Jump on in.
I love it. I had to throw somebody out yesterday because they were being a dick. There's one rule for the room, is don't be a dick.
Yeah, I did that in my group as well. Yeah, some guys have started like calling me sexist because I called the moon Mother Moon and divine feminine energy. It's actually like in so many cultures that the moon represents divine feminine and the sun represents divine masculine. But he's like, oh, so it's just an opinion. I was like, well, it's a belief system, and you call it opinion or belief, whatever. But just.
Well, no. So the person who was being a dick yesterday was trying to get members of the group to join their Telegraph conversation. They kept on messaging. Just that.
Yeah.
Fuck off. No. But that's the lovely thing about running your own business, because you get to set the rules.
Yeah. Exactly. You get to choose who you want to work with.
This is the thing, is when you say it's then finding your tribe, and it's finding your tribe, like you're saying, sort of like connecting with more entrepreneurs. And when you start up as running a business, you go from, and I don't know about you, but I found whenever I've started running business, my employed friends, I've got nothing to say to them anymore, because I don't care about Fred who nicked the mug or ate the last biscuit out the tin. I give no fucks. But it's then finding your entrepreneurial community and the ones that work for you, that you then feel part of a community and you feel held and supported and guided. And that's where the entrepreneurial community came in. Actually, that's where it's sort of I go and seek out people like me.
Yeah. And that's important, to have people that understand you and support you in your tribe, because we're humans and we need that. We're not meant to be in solitude and on our own all the time. It's not in our makeup. It's not in our DNA. And although it is beneficial to learn how to be by yourself and be independent and live in solitude, but it's not for us to be completely and utterly always in solitude. And find, like, when you find your tribe, you're like, I feel like home. It feels like home, doesn't it?
Yeah. And that's so the Wednesday thing, when people come into the group coaching session, it started the first few weeks, people a little bit tentative, but it's now a space where people can turn up. It's like, it's brilliant, because people are actually building friendships and networks outside of this, and they're sort of like collaborating and they're body doubling and they're supporting each other. And it started from a bunch of us brains getting. It started because in the pandemic, I was sitting in my home office and I got nobody to ask questions of. And I'm all right, well, I've got this tiny little community. Anybody want to come into a group room and answer some questions with me? And that was it. And now we have this weekly group coaching session.
I love that.
That's amazing.
So thank you so much for joining me. And I always ask my guests these 3 questions at the end of the podcast. So the podcast is called That Inner Voice. The first one is, what does your inner voice say to you?
What, right now?
just in general.
Right.
I always get people with this one. Like, what really? A real inner voice, or what you want me to say?
Oh yeah. So right now, so I've been I part of my consultancy. I'm sort of working with an organisation that works with neurodiverse people. We're recruiting a new board of trustees. So we've done some interviews, and they've made me lunch. So my inner voice is like, your lasagna's getting cold.
It's like, yeah, piss off, Jen. I want to go and eat food.
Yeah. And then the other bit of my brain said, yeah, but you just ate 2 chocolate biscuits, so shh, you're not hungry. Your lasagna's getting cold.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, and then the rest of my inner voice is going all over the place. You don't want to know what I was thinking about. I don't know about you. I have a really naughty mind. This is why I can't often tell people what my inner brain goes, because quite often it's naughty things. Yeah.
Gutter, I call it. Yeah.
Anyway, what are the 2 questions?
Just where you sort of gazing and then you start giggling to yourself. And then you're like, what are you laughing at? Like, don't worry about it. Just me, myself, and I up here.
You know when you get these partners and like, what are you thinking about?
Oh, don't. Yeah.
I've got this thing. You only ask questions you really want to know the answer for. So if you want me to tell you what I'm thinking about, I will tell you. But you're not going to want to know.
Totally relate. Yeah. And I said about the filter, didn't I? Just when we were backstage before we actually pressed record, didn't it? Sometimes my filter works, but often it's very broken. Yeah. And things come out then. It's
when you, but sometimes you don't. I don't know about you, but I find sometimes that some things come out of my mouth, and my brain then doesn't realise it's inappropriate until we go, tumbleweeds happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we said a bad thing again.
Because I'm very like, I wouldn't say I'm black and white thinking at all, but I'm very much say it like it is. I don't mince my words. So, and that can come across as rude, or I can be disrespectful, and it's really not the case. But it's just what it is. What it is.
Well, again, there's that neurotypical expectation of how social interaction works. Neurodivergent people, no, we just shit comes out. You ask me, does this dress look nice? No, it's fucking awful.
Yes, this is a problem I had with female friendships growing up. So I grew up with all boys, and I mainly had all blokes as friends because girls just hated me. Because I was like, why are you wearing that for? And I'd be like, it looks horrible. But you know what I mean? Like, I meant that with love. With a pure love. I don't want you to go out and
my sister said
much nicer in something else. And it sounds so horrid, doesn't it?
My sister said somebody once about me, said, well, sometimes things come out of her mouth. They're always meant with love, but quite often they're not. And they don't sound very loving, but she's never malice, there's no malice in what she says.
I'm definitely one of those friends that you shouldn't play my voice notes if you're in public. I remember one of my friends did that, and they voice noted back. They said, thanks for that. I was in the middle of Audi, and I had to quickly scurry to turn you off. Yeah. So yeah, we relate to each other on that one. So the second question then is, what are you most excited about at the minute? It could be anything.
I can't say lasagna again because that'll make me feel like Garfield.
Lasagna.
Oh, do you know what I'm doing? Oh my God, I'm going to see. So I live out in Norfolk, and Grayson Perry's got an exhibition, and I'm going to go and see that tomorrow.
Ooh, that's very exciting.
I'm so excited. It's the pre-therapy years. So I went to an art gallery a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going again. So I'm going out to see some art, which means I'm going to go and look at pretty things. I've missed sort of visual stimulation so hard in the pandemic. So I'm excited about that and that.
I went to the Harry Potter Warner Brothers studios on Wednesday.
Oh, cool.
Exciting. I was jumping around like a kid, and my child that I went with, we just kept staring at me, and I was just like, look at that. And it was like, I was the kid, and they were the adult.
But this is the thing, we put down the expectation of what adult looks like. You can then, this is one of the things I love about neurodivergent people is we have fun.
Yes.
Neurotypicals kind of get to about 18. When I was a hairdresser, one of my first and my trade is as a hairdresser and master barber. And when I owned my hair salon, I purposely targeted it at the silver market, so sort of 50 plus, because I can't fucking stand those people from about 20 to 45 who are desperately trying to be posh and get one up with, I've got no time for, oh, you've got a new car, and oh, Philomena went and did her grade 8 exams, and fuck that. What I liked was my little old people, because they gave no fucks anymore. Yes. And they had lives. They were naughty. They were creative. They had fun. They did things for the fun of it. This is what neurodivergent people are. We go and have fun for fun's sake.
I often get called, like, you know, a 40-year-old child. Because I do feel like I'm still a little girl inside, and I'll just have fun with it, you know.
But this is what happens.
Given how I want to run down the aisle of the supermarket and skid with the trolley, I'll do it. I do all the time, and I'll sing in public, and I'll just be silly, I'll just be me, and like that's one of the most freeing things in the world is zero fucks given.
Yes, but you should. I mean, this is what life is. I mean, all those epithets about life is not a dress rehearsal, blah 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 blah. But you sort of like given all these things around saying that you should. I shouldn't have pink hair. I'm 43, just about to turn 44 years old. I shouldn't have this. I shouldn't. Is it fun? Does it bring you joy? And it's that I'm a lover of RuPaul's Drag Race, and it's if they ain't paying your bills, then pay it no mind. So unless you're paying my bills, you don't get to comment on anything that happens around here.
In my life, yeah, absolutely.
And even then.
And then the third question is, what is the best bit of advice you've ever been given by somebody else?
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm going to do you, RuPaul, again. If you can't love yourself, then how the hell are you going to love somebody else?
I like that.
And loving yourself is about knowing yourself. And knowing yourself is about understanding what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what makes you happy, what doesn't make you happy. And giving yourself the confidence and permission to say, I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay for me. And knowing that you are complete as a human being, just as you are.
Yes, I love that. And what a great way to end our chat on this podcast. So where can people find you, Sara?
You can find me at How to Entrepreneuro on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook at Sara Kedge, SaraKedge, or sarakedge.com. And you can find me in those places. I apologize for the website if you're watching this very soon, because I'm just about to set fire to it and start again. One of the things with ADHD brain, I've sort of like made this website bit by bit, and then somebody looked at it and was like, that's dog shit, so I need to burn it and start again.
Yeah, burn it all down, start again. Yeah, love it. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you watching and listening have got some value. And if you are having some of those aha moments throughout this production, then the conversation, then, you know, do get in touch with myself or Sarah if you'd like any more info or some support with whatever you're going through. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much. That was another episode of That Inner Voice. Do join me next time on the next episode. Bye for now.